Welcome to EJH Bruce Cars. So it's kind of blustery and it's been raining a little bit on and off, but the weather is sunny right now, so thought we might do something a little bit easier. So I've got the drive shaft. It's actually the original one out of the car, so it is plenty old. So we're going to clean that up and replace all the U-joints in it, and I'll show you. I'm going to mark it up so we don't put it back together incorrectly. I'll show you how to do that. That'll be an easy one in a quick video, but that's okay too. We'll have a bit of fun. So let's get started. So I thought I'd show you the two drive shafts. This is the one out of the TR2. This is a TR6, and they're pretty much identical, but these ends look completely identical. They seem to be the same length. I mean, I didn't measure them with a micrometer, but the only real difference I see is how this terminates here. So this piece, because this will be a hollow tube, and that is welded on, and this has a lip, and this one's got a smaller lip. And then these ends pretty much the same. You see they had the TR6 one, the grease point, it's got a bolt in it. This one had a nipple in it because this may have been changed at some point, who knows. But we're going to clean it up. We need to clean this up. This moves, but it's kind of sticky. As you see, it should really move to there. So I'll clean that up. And we're going to take this apart before we paint it and everything else. And this is just like a sheet metal cap. That there'll be a felt washer on the inside, but that keeps this from falling off. So I'm going to take the wire wheel, and this is the TR2 one. I think I'm just going to use it. They both seem to be about the same, but neither one of the sliding joints seems excessively worn, so I'm going to stick with the original TR2 one. So I'll take the wire brush and clean this up, and then we'll get back to you. Well, I found a couple other small differences now that they're clean. If you look, this is the TR6. This is tapered, and that is not, and that's got a little shoulder in it, which this does not have. This has got more machining here than this does, and most importantly, there's an arrow right there and another arrow there. So that's to line up the drive shaft if you take it apart. This one has the part number, which you probably can't read, but it's 208075, and I checked, that's a drive shaft, and they list the same drive shaft, TR2 through TR6. And this one very faintly has an arrow right there. Here's that part number again here, but I don't see a corresponding ando, though it was a little rusty there, so it may have been there, may not have been there. So, and this one's got a weight welded on it. This does not, but it seems unlikely that it's not balanced. Anyway, so just small changes. I noticed on the Rimmer's parts diagram, you can see that they show this as being tapered, so this is the later one. So this is a fairly late in production. This is 6,600 and change, TS66 something something. So they made 8,000, so it's in the last quarter of the ones they made. So, well, not that it's really important, but just something to show. So it's got two balancing weights, so that means that it's been dynamically balanced as opposed to just gravity balanced. You know, just the same way when you balance a tire, the weights you put on either side, the front side and the back, don't always line up, just depending on where the weights were. And I'm not really seeing any machining marks or anything else, so I don't know, maybe they didn't balance it, who knows. So anyway, so that sets that alignment, and at the same time I've put an F here and an F there for front, because this is the front U-joint, and an R here and an R there for the rear, just to keep it square. Like I said, I just cleaned that up. I was curious to see if they were both marked the same. It's funny because this arrow, not identical, but it's similar to what the military uses for a proof mark on things like handguns and stuff when they've been tested for military, that the head of the arrow is a bit wider. It's like a broad arrow. Anyway, so we'll clean this up pretty much. I'm not going to bother to try to clean it here, because when we take it apart, that'll be the time. So go ahead and start taking this apart then. So these U-joints have the circlips in are just sort of bent wire. The other one had internal snap rings. So these ones you could just use pliers on. The other ones you could use pliers, but you'd be better off to use snap ring pliers as opposed to this needle nose. So these are still pretty dirty. Just squeeze them together. It'll probably help if you can get them to rotate a bit. That'll help loosen them up. And see that? We've got one side up now just from rotating it. And that one will come out. There we go. Well, that one went for the big ride. We get the idea. And I get the rest of these out. So a couple of these, when I'm working with the pliers, only one side move. So what you can do with these, use this to drift, get it in there on the one that's not moving, because once the one moves, the other one tends to stay stuck. Get it in there, give it a few taps, and most of the time it'll just start turning. Once it starts turning, it should be a lot easier to get out. There, that one's moved. Yep, that one came out. So most of the time they go for a ride when they come out, so be ready for that. I mean, not that I always try to save a couple of these just in case you ever get a U-joint and one of the circlips is missing. And that's happened before. Look at that, we actually lifted that one out. So this is just a scratch off. I use that. This one, it was moving, but this one was dragging, and every time I pulled hard enough to get this out, the other side slipped off. But I squeezed it in and I got that underneath, and you can see that lifted that right out of there. And now that that's up in the air, this should be easier. So I wire brushed in here, but now I got all those snap rings out. I'm just taking the scratch off or a small screwdriver. Try to get those boards as clean as you can. It's just going to make your life easier to knock these out. The real question is, that going to come out of there easily? Well, it did. You can see that's moved almost 1/4 of an inch now. Didn't have to beat on it too hard, so that's nice. That came out pretty well. Now that still had grease in it. Pretty impressive. It's a nice thing, and once you have these out, you can just take, where I get these roller bearings all over the place. Not that we're going to keep them, but try not to make too big a mess out here. We can just take a drift and punch that out. One of the things I really want to do is clean these boards up. So this is just a wire brush. Yep. A little bit of rust. I mean, because the caps fit in pretty tight, there's not too much happens in there. So it's always nice just to clean it out, and you can see that the snap ring grooves are full of gunge, so I'll clean those out with a scratch off. Also went through, cleaned up the center. It's interesting, these are standard Harding Spicer Parse FK2 CB31, maybe 51, 61. So you must be careful when you take these apart that If you bang on them too hard, you can actually bend these things. I've seen that particularly on smaller stuff, like it used to happen a lot with PTO shafts and stuff. PTO is power takeoff, or something like on a tow truck or a heavy truck with hydraulics, that the hydraulic pump is run off a shaft off the transmission. And because they carried so little horsepower, they're a lot less robust than these power line drive shafts are. And I've seen, I had one that must have crushed those together another ½ an inch. That was years ago. Anyway, so here it is, pretty much all cleaned up. I need to take this out too. What I usually do is I'll just take this into the vise. I'll open the jaws of the vise and put that there, then I can tap it on either side the same way we did that end cap. And to get this apart, I already loosened this up with a big pair of channel locks, but it just unthreads from there. And then this should come off, just like that. And that's what it is this cap won't go over those splines. So these don't look too bad, but we'll take and clean all this 70-year-old grease off of it, and we'll re-grease it. And it also has a grease point right there to be greased later. So these old U-joints, these dust seals, these are metal, right? So they don't always come up through there. So if you wind up with the U-joint and the metal hidden and this stuck, you just use a big pair of vice grips and grab a hold of it and give it a twist. It should come out pretty easy after that. Just like that. Maybe not quite so easy, but they do come out. These ones, not as greasy as the other ones, though there was a grease port, at least on the other U-joint. So you see that metal just fits through there. So if you get a couple of these rollers falling over, which they tend to do, this thing will jam a little sideways and no way it'll go through there. So that takes care of that. And then this one we'll just use a drift and knock it on through the rest of the way. So the other nice thing about taking the end off, it makes it easier to bring it inside and do this on the vise. Easy peasy. There we go. So we'll go clean that one up and then we'll see about putting the U-joints back in. So we're going to start putting this back together. You can see I painted this while it was apart. Make sure you wipe out any paint you get in here with a, some lacquer thinner on a rag or something. So first I like to get one started. Just a little bit. So I usually just do this in the vise. I suppose you could use, a big press or something, but these shouldn't go in that hard. At least they're not supposed to. Big thing is to make sure you're pushing them in square. Yeah, see how that one popped? It's because they're going a little crooked. Just kind of work it around a little bit. There we go. So that's going better now. So then what we're going to do is put the U-joint in, make sure the bearings don't fall down. So we're going to look, make sure the bearings are good. This grease fitting is center on this, so it doesn't really matter, but sometimes they point one way out. So if you get a pointy one, you want it pointed away from this back plate. Otherwise it's just going to give you a hard time. So fade it in. There we go. That's set onto the bearing cap so the bearings can't go anywhere. Once it finally straightens up, it's all good. So you're basically just going to push that in until it's flush. There we go. And what we're going to do, put the other one in here. And we'll slide the U-joint halfway so it's sitting in both of them. So hopefully that will help to prevent the needles from falling down. And if you ever push these in and find out that they won't go the last 16th, that usually means that one of the needle bearings fell down into the bottom. You see how that's floating in between. Still floating quite nicely. So we got them flush, and they need to go down about 1/8 of an inch or so. So I'm going to find a socket that'll fit this. What you want is a socket that's just slightly smaller than that end cap. What we're going to do is we're going to push it in, and actually we'll push it. I usually push it just a shade further than the snap ring groove. I don't know how well you can see that, but the snap ring groove is about a 64th of an inch higher than the end cap. Then we're going to go get a pair of snap ring pliers and we'll put that in. The snap ring pliers, get the one side in, that side's in, and that went right in. You want to make sure you push it, make sure it's down all the way. And then what we're going to do, I'm going to do the same thing with the other side, and we're going to push it until we feel it stop, and that will have also pushed that other bearing cap the rest of the way in. I like to do this in the center of the vise because the vise jaws do walk a little bit. And that feels like that's probably it. Well, we're only halfway across the groove, so it's got to go a bit further. Oh yeah, it didn't push this one back all the way yet. Oh, there it goes. So if you get it, it won't go that last 16th and you've knocked the bearing over. So there's that other groove showing. Let's get the other snap ring in. It's really easy on these end ones where you don't have the whole drive shaft flopping around on you. There we go. You probably heard that snap in. So that's done. So there we go. And that thing is still rotating. So I know that that's good. I mean, it's snug. Don't forget that we push the caps against each other. But that's good. So I just need to do that 6 more times, and because it'll be fun with the drive shaft floating around on it, but that'll be okay. Don't forget that we've got our marks on here somewhere, so we can get this lined up correctly. Oh, we got all our U-joints assembled. I cleaned out the splines, and now I want to pre-grease them. This is just wheel bearing grease for disc brakes. Don't really want fibrous stuff in here, which is what drum brake grease usually has. So we'll just paint that in. Make sure you get it down on the bottom of all the grooves there. Put some up in the end here. There's some kind of a felt seal back up in there too. And then we need to do the female end as well. And I'm putting plenty of grease in here. The one thing I don't like with these is the grease fills there up into this pocket. I don't know, can't really see it, but there's like a freeze plug here, but it's got a hole in the middle, so as that moves back and forth, when the axle goes up and down, it doesn't create an air cushion, but it's just pushing grease down there, so it's not really, not forcing it, because you can't fill that pocket or the drive shaft won't move. So I really like to grease these really well before we start, because this is the best greasing they're going to get. Not that, you know, putting a bit of grease in the nipple and stuff probably sets up in like 3 pumps, because otherwise people tend to fill them up. But this is the primary place they're going to get grease from. I mean, I grant you that centrifugal force will puts that out to the edge and it gets warm and it'll help to work its way back, but you know, it's not as good as a brush going down the splines. So now there's my arrow, and there's my other arrow. Now I get those lined up. There it is. When it goes easy. And you can see how much grease I pushed out. But that's okay, that'll keep that thing greased. Now we just tighten that up. Get a bit of rag here and wipe this down, because I'm just sliding around. Just an aesthetic thing. So, but there it is. Nice new U-joints in the ends. All the clips went in. Slides assembly works really well now. It was really stiff before. And we'll put a bit of paint on it and it'll look beautiful. One other thing I wanted to talk about briefly. Here's 2 of the bolts that we took out that held that in. This is the correct bolt. This is the incorrect bolt. So you see this has got a shoulder that is as big as the threads. And it's the thickness of those 2 flanges together. So the flange is right against this full size, whereas these threads are smaller than that, and it allows it to wobble. And if you look, that says Dorman, which is a supplier of aftermarket bolts, and that's an original bolt. So, and this one's pretty beat up. So when you put this back, make sure you have the right bolt. These are available from all the usual sources. I would definitely recommend putting new lock nuts on. These are nylock. Well, actually these are not. These are lock nuts. So if they're lock nuts, they might be all right. Let's see. They are. So the way these work, this end is slightly old. As a matter of fact, you can actually see that if you look hard enough. So I guess you could reuse these nuts, but definitely get the right bolts. Now I got another set of bolts kicking around extra, so I'm going to go through these and replace whichever ones are really kind of goofed up. This is from people using open-end wrenches on here instead of a box wrench. Anyway, just wanted to note that I've seen this a lot. You know, it's one thing if a bolt falls out of your drive shaft and you're on the road and you find anything you can to put it in there to get it home, that's one thing. But to drive around with that all the time, that's a very different story. Matter of fact, look at that. How buggered those threads are right there. Which tells me this was doing that. Anyway, so just something to watch out for. So I hope you enjoyed that. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and comment. And we will see you next time.